Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transue, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show. I see quite a few of you already live with us, so I'm glad we ended up doing this. Lisa and I have a smile on our face because if you're wondering, have I transcended this reality, turned into a ghost, and came back to do podcast interviews? As interesting as that would be, the answer is actually no. We had some last-minute camera issues, and Lisa is an incredibly busy person. I wanted to get her on today, and honestly, she's the star. She's the person that you want to hear from. The audio quality is good, and we have a whole separate audio podcast that will never actually see the video, Lisa. So I do know our content manager, Steven, is watching this right now, and he is probably slapping me across the face. But Steven, I promise this is the best video that we have for today. I guess the camera is either broken or something, so I'll get that figured out. Anyway, we will jump into this episode number 408 of the Health Detective Podcast with none other than Dr. Lisa Pomeroy. So she is someone that I only got to meet virtually for the first time very recently during our Holistic Health Week. She actually started off the week, and we thank you for your service for that because your first segment had like 450 live viewers, and it just set the stage for what ended up being an incredible week. There was like 6,000 people that ended up viewing that first day over time. So of course, all of them got to see that first episode, which I just think is amazing. And I am a secret fanboy of Lisa because throughout the years of being an FDN practitioner, I have gotten to hear her on some of our advanced courses. She actually has produced some of those for us at FDN. We're not necessarily here to talk about that specific thing today, but it is kind of cool to know that she's done that for us. What we are here to talk about is a particular test that is a foundational lab at FDN. I've ran it in the past, and then it has nothing to do with this podcast. This is totally just convenient, and I'll explain why later. But I actually just ran one again, or will be running one this week. I think it just arrived at our house today, or will be arriving this afternoon, which is cool. I'm talking about the GI map stool test, so we will get into that very soon. Her background, just so you guys have an idea if you don't know her. Dr. Lisa Pomeroy is a traditional naturopath with extensive training in functional medicine, lab test interpretation, and gut microbiome balancing through, I wanted to make sure I pronounce this right. Is it the Kalish Institute or Kalish?
Kalish. Yeah, Dr. Dan Kalish.
Kalish, there we go.
Yep.
Through the Kalish Institute, the Microbiome Restoration Center, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, and other organizations. In addition to being a graduate of the Kalish Institute mentorship program, Lisa is a certified microbiome analyst through Dr. Jason Horlak. Currently, she works as a clinical consultant for Diagnostic Solutions Laboratory, which does produce the GI map stool test and educates health practitioners on functional lab test interpretation through her business, Pomeroy Institute for Functional Nutrition. So thank you so much for doing this, even with this ghost version of me. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, no problem. You know, I'm always happy to talk about the gut.
All right, cool. So I do want to start off a little bit aside from the stool test itself. We'll jump into that very quickly, but I don't know this about you, so I want to know this, and I think most of the audience members would want to know, how did you end up getting into this line of work? And I mean, even just becoming a naturopath, because this is a pretty big life decision. And I have typically found that no one gets into our line of work in natural and functional medicine by accident. I've met 2 people over time that said that they just did it randomly, but almost everyone else has some type of story behind that. So if I can ask, what led you to this career path?
Yeah, and there definitely is a story behind it. I'm one of those where I needed it myself, and so I had to learn it, and then I'm so passionate about it because I don't want other people to go through what I went through. You know, when I was little, I actually planned on becoming a veterinarian. My dad is a third-generation vet. I love animals. I worked at his vet clinic when I was very young, loved it, and then I got sick. You know, what I didn't know at the time is I picked up Lyme disease and Bartonella, H. pylori, you name a parasite, I had it, and all these infections just piled up on one another, and I was just so sick. I mean, by the time I was in college, I could hardly function. And I had seen, conventional doctors, went to a bunch of holistic doctors. I liked the holistic approach, but at that point, it was so basic. It's like, oh, well, you have gut issues. Here, take this enzyme. Here, take this hydrochloric acid tablet. And it's like, well, it helps a little bit, but I mean, I have major issues. This is not going to get me functioning. And so that's where it's like, okay, I have to dig deeper. And so I started learning about functional medicine and going into the tests. Like, oh, we can actually send in our poop and they can analyze it and see what exactly is going on in here, and start getting into advanced testing. And that's where I was able to finally identify all these infections I had and start to tackle them one by one and start to restore my health. So it is quite the journey, but it's something where it's like other people, they didn't. Again, this was kind of back in the day a little while ago where, functional medicine was kind of in its infancy, but it was more just, okay, we're just going to give you something natural in place of the drug. And it's like, we need to actually figure out what's the root cause, what's actually going wrong, instead of just giving another Band-Aid. So that's where I love the functional medicine and why I become so passionate about teaching other practitioners is I believe, these functional lab tests help identify the root cause of the issues, and then we know how to really target our protocols to help the patient or the client.
I never would wish these bad things on someone, but I got to say it is so cool sometimes, and it's almost hard to believe that this isn't like why you're here in a sense, because it's like you get these people that have these illnesses or diseases or whatever, and then look at the contribution that they make to the world because that happened to them, right? And I'm sure you still would have helped out a bunch of amazing animals or something if you became a veterinarian, but the bottom line is it's because we go through these things that triggers this passion that, man, it never goes away. And I always say for myself, I was sick from the age of basically 5 until 18, 19 years old. And as much as that sucked, and quite frankly, especially the teenage years, I almost felt like I had that stripped away from me in some sense. I wouldn't change it because the trade-off is I have found so many of my friends who I love to death, but they graduate high school and college and they kind of get into these career paths that pay the bills, but they're not necessarily passionate about. So it's almost like they had the childhood and teenage years and then the rest of their life is not their favorite thing, where I feel like I gave up those initial years, but the trade-off is I get to do what I love for the rest of my life and really impact people. And ideally, you could do it in both phases, right? We could still have the cake and eat it too, gluten-free,
Yep.
of course,
Yep.
seed oil-free, all that stuff. But in this case, I wouldn't change it. So you are clearly very passionate about many things in this functional medicine space. Today, we're talking about stool testing, and we're going to get into the GI map itself. I want to talk about a high-level overview first. So the infection side of things, to me, this is something that I still get kind of confused about. So here's what I'm getting at. As an FDN practitioner, Reed Davis came up with his system of labs and he worked with all these people to come up with that. So I get why that's unique, and I get why that's something that Western medicine might not look at in the same way, because it's like basically this really smart hippie dude did a system of labs with 11,000 people and came up with something truly unique. I think even if he was here, he could still say he recognizes why they don't teach that at medical school yet, even though it would be amazing if they did. What I do not understand is how Western medicine is not on board with the long-term implications of some of these chronic infections. It seems that they only look at them in acute senses and never really look at them from the long-term side. So one, I'd like you to correct me if you think that's incorrect. That's totally fine. And two, if I am correct in my assumption, why is it that we have so much science around what these things can do to the body, and yet Western medicine doesn't look at some of these chronic infections that we find in stool in the same way that we do?
I know, and it's so unfortunate. I completely agree. I mean, the research is there, but I think they say, what is it, like 20, 30 years for what's coming out in the research to actually be implemented in clinical practice. So they're just, behind the times. And, if we're looking at cutting edge, it's like, okay, there is a link between, let's say, blastocystis hominis and Hashimoto's. Say if I have a client coming to me who's been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, I'm looking for H. pylori, I'm looking for blastocystis hominis, I'm looking for Yersinia, I'm looking for yeast, and this is all just straight from the research. We know there's a connection. Yet you go to your conventional physician, and their whole treatment regime for Hashimoto's is, Well, what I was told, because I had Hashimoto's, was, well, basically, we're just going to let the autoimmune process completely destroy your thyroid gland, and then we're going to give you Synthroid, one of the 5 hormones that the thyroid gland makes. And then, and that's going to be, you're just going to be on it lifelong because your thyroid gland has been destroyed. That wasn't acceptable to me. It's like, well, first, you're not replacing all the thyroid hormones. And second, you're waiting for the end process where my thyroid has been completely destroyed. I'd like to stop the progression of that now if I could. And then, maybe choose a better medication if there is enough destruction that has already taken place. So again, it's like they aren't looking at the full picture, even though they could. The research is there, the testing is available. It isn't happening,
Yeah.
hopefully someday, but just not yet.
Okay. And for those that don't know what she's referring to, and actually, I'm not this smart. I just saw this the other day again. I was reminded of it, so that's why I have the numbers in my head. It's something like it takes 17 years for 50% of these doctors and health practitioners to actually adopt what the science shows. So your 20 to 30 year estimate is probably correct for almost all of them to adopt it, right? And I would assume some of that's probably going to change in this world of AI. AI is like social media, right? There's amazing things and there's bad things that come with it. I think one of the amazing things will be that this information gets utilized a lot quicker. That's my personal prediction. I'm not saying I'm right, but that's what I would bet on. But yeah, right now, guys, we've been living in a world where what we just said is not an opinion. It's actually been shown that it takes 17 years for 50% of these Western professionals to actually adopt this stuff. So we're behind. And if you wonder, well, why don't they spend all their time learning it? It's probably because they're spending their time handling 30 to 50 patients in a day, right? So they're so overloaded. It's never, and I know, Lisa, this is your philosophy as well. I always just make sure we state this every time for someone that's new to the show or podcast. This is not anti-Western medicine. This is just being realistic about where we're at. And these people are going through so much every day. They also have families. They got a dog at home, probably. They have other responsibilities outside of these 30 to 50 people they need to see each day, 5 days a week. So believe it or not, they don't always have the time to be listening to 10 podcasts in a week like some of us do. And podcasts is not necessarily always where you should get your information from. Everything that we share here, you should always fact check yourself, because unfortunately, if I talk long enough, I'm going to say something wrong. If our guests talk long enough, that's probably going to happen to them too. So just something to always think about, that this latest information is being brought out in these alternative means, and the doctors normally don't have the time to listen to it. Or, I think this is fair to say, sometimes we get shot down a little bit. I think that's happening less and less as more and more chronic disease is happening, again, for better or for worse. But historically speaking, it's like, well, I went to school for 12 years and did residency and all this stuff. Why should we be listening here? And the reality is we should be listening because the stats are very clear. We're all getting sicker and sicker despite more people having access to Western medicine than ever before, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, it takes a while to implement these things. And of course, if you graduated how many years, their education, if they've been out, they've been out 20 years, which meant they went to medical school, a decade before that. And so, the technologies are even different. Like stool testing today, we do different technologies than we did 30 years ago. So everything's advancing. And a lot of doctors, there are, again, great doctors who, they're doing the, I don't know how they go through so many patients in a day. I just couldn't do it. You see why so many are just mentally burnt out. But, to read through the articles on PubMed and look through your medical journals and go to conferences and seminars, to stay up to date on this, they just don't have time. So they're just looking at, this is what I was taught, this new thing, I don't know what it is. I haven't had time to interpret it. And so I'm just going to dismiss it because it's just not my wheelhouse.
Right. So in this functional medicine world, we're, helping out obviously these people who need these alternative means, at least alternative for now. One of the best things that we can do is stool testing. So I'd love to talk about now why the GI map to you is such a special test and what unique things it brings to the market. I know there's many things here, so we can just start with maybe your top 1 to 3 things. And the reason I ask this is because Oh my gosh, it seems like there's a new stool test every other month in our space. So the question constantly comes up, well, what about this one? Or what's the difference here? So we could probably spend 10 hours together at least focusing on all the main stool tests on the market and their various differences. I think it's probably just better to focus on the highlights and strengths of the GI map. So what are some of the things with the GI map that make it so unique and such a powerful test? Because again, we choose to use it as a foundational test at FDN for a reason, but I'd love to hear that directly from you as to why this is so powerful.
Sure. So, what makes a test unique is, starting with the technology itself. The GI map measures every microbe with what's called qPCR technology, so quantitative polymerase chain reaction. So, basically, you have these probes. And so, these probes are designed to lock like a lock and key mechanism with a very specific microbe. So, only a microbe that has that exact DNA that the probe is looking for will match with it. And that's where if something shows up on the test, we know without a doubt that it was that particular microbe and no other microbe. There's no case of mistaken identity because only that particular microbe has that exact DNA. And that's what we do. It's a DNA assay, and that's where, like crime scenes, for example, that's where they can say this person was there, even though we're not seeing the person commit the crime. We see, they left a hair behind, they left, a drop of blood, they left a fingernail. So that's kind of what we're looking for, just the DNA of the organisms. We quantify it to know, how many of them is there. Some of these microbes are, they're normal at very low levels, but if they get too high, they can be really problematic. And so that's where, it not only looks for the microbes, it quantifies them. So it really helps guide your clinical interpretation and decision making based on those levels.
To further your analogy here, because you talked about, I think the crime scene analogy is perfect for a variety of reasons, but one of them is because just because someone was at a crime scene does not necessarily mean that they did commit the crime. So that's where, to me at least as a trained FDN, this clinical hat needs to come in, because I need to figure out, yes, who was there at the crime scene, but who's actually involved in the issues itself. So one of the things that we learn, of course, as FDN practitioners is this clinical correlation side, right? For us, there would be, generally speaking, a difference between someone that shows up with H. pylori on the GI map, as an example, and let's say one client has a history of ulcers, cystic acne, anxiety and depression, and has constant stomach pain and loose stools, versus someone who has none of those symptoms at all, but yet, otherwise presents the same on the GI map. So it's not that we wouldn't necessarily address it in the long run. It's just we might address it with a different priority for the person who has symptoms that are clearly correlated with that stuff. So that's one of the arguments I typically hear. I'm not saying that it's right. I just want to know how you would address it. Some people will say that because this DNA testing is so sensitive, you don't always necessarily know what's relevant. So do you follow this same principle of clinical correlation that FDN teaches, or do you have a different approach? How do you know when something shows up on the test, it's actually meaningful and something that we need to do something about as the practitioner?
Yeah, and the lab does help a lot with that by providing the reference ranges. So, like certain organisms, like say, Klebsiella pneumoniae, that one, most people are going to have a little bit of Klebsiella in their gut. Now, it's called a pathobiont, which means that very teeny tiny levels, it can be okay. But if it overgrows, that thing is a massive histamine producer. So you can end up with really high histamine levels. It's gram negative and it has this really potent LPS or lipopolysaccharide that's very pro-inflammatory. It can cause arthritises like ankylosing spondylitis. So if that one gets out of control, it's going to cause a lot of issues in most cases. So that's one where the lab has a reference range set at, I think it's like E3, E4, depending on whether you're at the genus level or the species level. Mm-hmm. But really, it's something subtly we know that we want to see less than DL for that, below the detectable limit. Now, when we see less than DL, it doesn't mean that none were there. Chances are there were some, because again, most people are going to have it at a very low level. But that's where the lab goes, okay, this is like a normal level. This is a level where it's not, getting out of control and blooming and out of proportion. This is like a normal, healthy person type level. Versus if we're starting to see it measurable, then we look at, okay, is it a number in black, which is it's there, it's kind of a moderate overgrowth? or has it crossed the line, the lab's reference range, to be more of a severe overgrowth? So if it's in red, we know that's causing problems. That is a very high level. Now, what symptoms it may cause may vary, but it's problematic at that level. Now, if it's the number in black, it's still there, it's still overgrowing. Now, again, that one I see is very problematic even at a moderate overgrowth level, but I am looking for symptoms. Okay, do they have joint pain? Do they have histamine intolerance symptoms? Do they have inflammation? It's going to put it higher up on my to-do list of things to address if I'm seeing those symptoms as well. So we are always, and again, we're looking for patterns. It's not just looking at a microbe, but looking for patterns too. If it's not just Klebsiella, but multiple pro-inflammatory microbes, even if they're all borderline, again, that's a problem.
Okay. I feel like this question might be too generalized because I know that we're very good at taking into account the client in front of us. We never treat the test results as people who are interested in the FDN philosophy or FDNs ourselves. But I still wanted to throw out there, if you see someone with test results that, the parasites there's some nasty parasites, you got H. pylori through the roof, maybe there's some other types of worms or whatever, like everything's kind of, messed up. Is there a certain priority that you typically give to certain sections? Do we try to address it all at once? Or is that an unfair question without having like the case notes of a client in front of us right now? I'm just kind of wondering if like everything was looking terrible, would there be something that you would pay more attention to or service to first?
Yeah, there definitely is a sequencing strategy, and some of it is individualized. If someone is in such terrible discomfort, we do have to do a little bit of symptom relief first. Certainly going out and blasting and killing bugs when a person is so uncomfortable, so inflamed, it's just not going to be our starting point. So actually for me, I always start with the last page of the report when I'm supporting the client. So it's like if they can't digest food, I'm getting the enzymes in there. If their immune system is burned out, their secretory IgA is very low, I'm supporting their gut immunity. I'm going to build that army so that if there are things I need to go out and kill, the immune system is actually going to help out in that killing process. And if they're highly inflamed, if their calprotectin's through the roof, again, I'm not going to start adding to the inflammation by killing a bunch of pro-inflammatory bugs. I'm going to calm down the inflammation first. So I actually start with the intestinal health markers section first before I even think about killing anything. And then there's kind of a north to south progression. That's what we're kind of taught, from a holistic standpoint, where, H. pylori is in the stomach. So, and the problem is where H. pylori is notorious for suppressing stomach acid. And you can think of your hydrochloric acid or your stomach acid as your lead digestive domino. So if you don't have the good stomach acid, if H. pylori is neutralizing it, you may have a problem with bile secretion. You may have a problem with pancreatic enzyme secretion. So everything just kind of goes to pot and doesn't work well. So that's where if H. pylori is there, I go after that first in almost every case. Now, say someone just picked up Giardia. They just went swimming in a lake in Colorado. They got a mouthful of water and had Giardia in it, and they're in the throes of acute, explosive diarrhea and super sick, and their Giardia is off the charts high. Yeah, I'm probably going to treat the acute parasite first. But barring that, a lot of people, when we're doing the tests, we're dealing with people who have chronic infections. So then I'm trying to fix them. If I fix the upper GI first, get the H. pylori cleared out, it's just going to be a lot easier to get the bacteria to come in balance, the yeast, the parasites, because everything is just going to work better if we fix that stomach first.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, you're building up the resilience of the person. That's like the low-hanging fruit in that sense. So that, yes, if we do go after something a little stronger, of course, a body that is more well off is going to be able to handle that better. They might experience less die-off symptoms, or if they're really lucky, none at all. That's usually not the case, but sometimes that could happen. I got to pause for a second and say, too, because you know how stressed I was about my normal camera not working. It took me until right now to realize that you have like the little poop emoji thing basically basically in real life in your background, and that is both adorable and hilarious. So you definitely walk the walk over there. Um,
I
by, by the
do.
way, as we get closer to the 30-minute mark, guys, we're not quite there yet, but always feel free to throw any questions that you have in the chat. It's pretty rare that we get someone exactly like Lisa on the show. So if you have any questions about the GI map or stool testing in general, please let us know in the chat. We'd love to see it. Something else that I was kind of curious about is some clients, I'm more asking this not because I don't think FDNs know this, I think they do, but because some of them struggle with the wording to their clients. A lot of people, when they come to us, seem to have an issue comprehending how they got these gut bugs. So I'm talking totally from the layperson perspective. You probably know what I mean. I'm not saying like a dumb person, just an otherwise reasonably intelligent person that knows nothing about holistic health and then has something like psoriasis. They almost find it somewhat hard to believe when I'm like, oh yeah, you could have this, that, their next thing. And then we get the results back and sure enough, they do have parasites and stuff. And they're like, wait, one, how did I get this? Two, how is this related to my skin issue? So from my understanding, the way that I've always tried to explain it is that, if we're under chronic stress, then one of the first things that goes in our body is, our ability to digest stuff properly. We actually are going to have depleted stomach acid anyway. You mentioned that in relation to H. pylori infections, but frankly, if you're under chronic stress, you're going to have depleted stomach acid as well. And I've kind of always looked at that as the simpler explanation that if we're running around under chronic stress, we're exposed to these pathogens anyway, and now you created an environment basically where they can kind of make camp and take over. I feel like sometimes that's probably too simple of an explanation. Is there another way that you explain this to people in terms of like, why do so many people have these chronic infections? And then even more confusing is like, how do they relate to these conditions that many people would think are totally unrelated? Like, oh, my psoriasis might have something to do with a parasite that I have. That's incomprehensible to most people if they're not in this space. So that's two questions in one. So I'll start with that first one. How do you help explain to the lay person how they could have accumulated chronic infections if their symptoms don't seem to have anything to do with what most people would assume are chronic infection symptoms, such as GI symptoms?
Yeah, and a lot of it comes back to, vulnerability. So, like you said, stress is a major one. Who doesn't go through some period of stress? Whether it's, you're a high schooler and you're, preparing for your SAT, or you just have a big exam or something like that, or, even happy stress, getting married, something like that, having a child. It's happy stress, but it's stress. And so for the body, it can't always differentiate. Stress is stress. And so the stress will tend to lower your stomach acid. And stomach acid is kind of like our first line of defense. So, it's protecting us from the bacteria on the food, the parasites on the food. And you don't have to go to a third world country. We have parasites, E. coli, salmonella, norovirus. We see outbreaks of these all the time. There was just a huge outbreak on lettuce that actually killed some people with E. coli. So that's where having good stomach acid is so important, because if you swallow it, whether it's coming in the water you drink, well water, we also have to look at things like that. These bugs can be in your well water if it's unfiltered. Even some things like Giardia, Cryptosporidium, they're very chlorine resistant. So you could even have chlorinated city water and it could come through. But yeah, stomach acid, if you're drinking it in the water, you're eating it on the food, if you have low stomach acid, you can't kill it when you swallow it. So it's more likely there's going to be more making it through the stomach into the intestinal tract that could then cause an infection. Now, we also have secretory IgA. So say it gets past the stomach. Well, secretory IgA is looking around for stuff and going, uh-oh, that salmonella doesn't belong here. They're going to attack it, they're going to engulf it and try to get it out of the body. Again, stress can cause low secretory IgA. Other things can cause, we need good beneficial bacteria like our butyrate producers to stimulate the production of SIG-A. We need vitamin A and D and zinc for secretory IgA. We even need zinc for stomach acid. So how many people, it's nutritional deficiencies, it's stress. All these things, your secretory IgA is low, making you vulnerable. Your stomach acid is low, making you vulnerable. And then, the lettuce, there's so many little nooks and crevices in the lettuce leaves. These things can hide even if you're washing them. or what I call the hairy berries. Like a raspberry for me is like a hairy berry. It has all these little hairs versus like a blueberry is nice and smooth. So it's a lot easier to wash things off of a smooth berry than a hairy berry. And so these things that you ingest them. And so that's where we rely on the body's defenses. They have to be strong to protect us.
Okay, so then the second question here, because that makes a lot of sense, and most people, I mean, at least in Western society, or for sure in Western society, are operating at suboptimal pretty much all the time from the day that they're born, because there's high stress, certainly more calories than ever before, but less nutrients in those calories also than ever before. So it's obvious how we get them. But the second question here, I'll kind of reframe it, because I don't. Most FDNs are not in this camp at all, but I always like them to be equipped to be able to. I don't want to use the word argue because it's not an argument, but I want them to be able to defend their viewpoints to the best of their ability. So one of the things that I hear about a lot, Lisa, is some people, especially the Instagram influencers, will almost make this case that if you just do the lifestyle stuff well enough, well, then some of these, pathogens will kind of normalize and everything's fine. I don't know that that's totally untrue, but I also don't think that that's perfectly true, especially if the person or client is maintaining their normal stressful lifestyle. So I would like to ask you directly, if someone has terrible stuff going on in their gut, they're super high on parasites, same example as before, really, low secretory IgA, super high on parasites, H. pylori's through the roof, you got some virulence factors. Is there ever a case where you wouldn't eventually be addressing those things directly with the client? Or do we really believe that if we just did the lifestyle stuff perfectly long enough, that that is going to regulate? Because I'm definitely in the first camp at this point where I'm thinking, I don't know how long you'd have to do the lifestyle stuff for this to regulate. It's almost like it got dysregulated because you didn't do the lifestyle stuff, maybe unintentionally, probably unintentionally actually. But now we have to do something about that to ever hope to get back to 100%. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, exactly. And I see so many GI map tests too, where it's like you hear the backstory. It's like this person, they're active, they're exercising, they have their stress dialed in, they eat a beautiful diet, fiber-rich diet. It's like they're doing everything that they know to do, and yet they're still super sick. And when I look at their GI map, it's like I can tell it's making a difference, but no diet or lifestyle interventions are going to fix an infection. And in some of the pro-inflammatory bacteria, again, I mean, maybe it's years and years and years of great diet and lifestyle, maybe you could get them down. But I mean, why suffer for 5 years when you could do like a 6 to 8 week herbal protocol and knock them down? But infections, I mean, that's what I see in these reports. It's like, okay, I can see, your great diet, you're feeding your beneficial flora, they look great, and we don't see the yeast overgrowth, and the pro-inflammatory bacteria don't look so bad, they're kind of curtailed. But you have H. pylori and you have two parasites. It's like you did everything. I can see the hard work you've put in. What you were able to do through diet and lifestyle, I see, but it can't kill infections, and that's what we're left with.
What a great point, because most people that come to us, not all, but most have already made some lifestyle changes, because unfortunately, as much as I'd love to believe this, we're just not there yet. We're not the first people that they go to, right? Usually they went through a long list of practitioners before they wind up with us, which is kind of amazing that we still even have the ability to help them if they've worked with that many people first and have been sick that long. But what a great point. You probably have been doing some of the lifestyle stuff. I don't want to get into this fully today, but I have a series coming on our podcast where I will be addressing some old health stuff, I'll put it that way. Long story short, Lisa, I got exposed to mold about a year and a half, 2 years ago for a year straight without knowing until it was way too late and I was very sick. And one, I just don't believe I should have gotten as sick as I got. Two, I've never gotten fully back to normal since then. And I'll kind of admit this on this one, but it's going to be more for that first of that series. So I did this stuff. I'm 29 now. I did FDN at like 20, 21 years old. And it took everything to do some of these tests and all this stuff. Like I was making like 400 or 500 a week back then. So to run some of these tests, was literally everything, let alone rent, whatever. And when I did the GI map, I had tanked secretory IgA, H. pylori with Veron's factors. If you can't tell, I've kind of been using my own example. Blastocystis hominis was through the roof, and a few other things, but like that was some of the main stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember trying a protocol very early on. It made me super sick. I herked straight
Mm-hmm.
away. And this is totally my fault because I was doing this on my own instead of working with an FDN practitioner. I was going through the course. So this is not the fault of FDN whatsoever. It's actually completely on me. When that first barrier came up, I kind of just gave up in terms of trying to address that stuff because I was working all the time, trying to make some extra money. I was getting into my speaking career, and like I'm like, I can't afford to be feeling like I have the flu every time I try something like this. And so it's been years, and I never really addressed some of that stuff fully. I have felt overall great. So to your point, it's like what happens when someone does 5 years of lifestyle stuff? I'm that guy. I did do
Mm-hmm.
that. And it got me to a place that I never would have thought possible. But you know where I got exposed is the first major stressor to come back into my life tanked me. And
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense. That wasn't someone then to me building up resilience for 5 years. That was someone managing symptoms for 5 years, me. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to get this back. I'll show my results with everyone as it happens. But yeah, I appreciate your candidness with that because looking back, I would not recommend what I did at all. I think I kind of hurt myself with that. So we're going to go to the questions here. We do have some from Michael. And Michael, I don't know if you tuned in a little bit later. And I'm only saying that because this question we're talking about the GI map specifically, so I'll try to reword this question a little bit so that it still helps you, Michael, but also is relevant for Lisa here. So Michael had asked, what lab tests do we need to ask our doctor to order for us? How do we convince our doctor to order these tests? So as FDNs, we're helping facilitate the lab order through our medical director program or through third parties. So we're not convincing anyone necessarily. But Lisa, to Michael's point here, if we could address this, is there any good way that you know of? Like, are there other tests that you could do through Western medicine that you consider worthwhile if you wanted to have the stuff covered by insurance for now? Or is it kind of just, hey, we have to figure out how to save the money to get this out of pocket, basically, and pay for these GI maps and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I mean, first of all, you have to convince your doctor that, gut infections like parasites are that they exist in the United States. That can be a hard sell right there. They don't believe that parasites are an issue unless you're, again, in like a third world country or something. And H. pylori, unless you have like severe gastric pain, like ulcer like pain, they're not going to test you for H. pylori. Yet, I mean, I'm looking for H. pylori in people with acne and Hashimoto's and rheumatoid arthritis, and it could be AFib. There's a huge meta-analysis on H. pylori's link with AFib, so it might be heart issues. So I'm looking for a link. They're just looking at, do you have gastritis? Nope, I'm not testing you for H. pylori. You don't have my number one symptom for H. pylori. So first, it would be a hard sell to get them to even order the testing. Then if they would order testing, their lab tests are just, they're not the same. It's not an apples to apples comparison with what you get with a GI map. So for, if they're doing bacteria, again, they're usually not going to do bacteria. It might be a culture. Now, the problem with a culture is it's a very old test. And, it can be great for picking up really odd, funky things, but, it's something where most of the gut bacteria, and when I say most, I'm saying like 95% of gut bacteria are anaerobic. They hate oxygen. So what happens when you take them out in a stool sample, you put them out on a petri dish in an oxygen-rich environment, they're just going to die. They're not going to grow out. So you're not even going to find the bad guys because they're not going to culture. They don't like that environment. They don't like the food provided to them on the petri dish either. So culture really isn't going to tell you much. And then their tests for parasites is what's called an ONP, ova and parasite. So it's a lab tech looking under the microscope at a stool sample. Now, again, the issue comes for if you're going to do a microscopic analysis, you need a highly trained lab tech. And again, in a country where we don't believe that parasites are a major issue in many cases, lab techs are not being trained to look for parasites. They don't know how to visually identify them that well. So they're going to miss a lot. They're not going to find them even if they're there. And so it's something where it's like if you're going to get a microscopic analysis, you need, again, a specialty lab with expert parasitologists. But the GI map, it takes those issues away. It's not a culture-dependent thing. So it doesn't matter if they're alive or dead. We're looking for DNA. Parasites, again, it's the DNA. You don't have to have them under the microscope to have a trained technician. The DNA is there or it's not. It's pretty cut and dry. So for me, I look at those tests will rarely ever find anything. So for me, I'd say save your money and get a test that's going to give you the information that you need.
Awesome. And Michael actually did say, yes, I came in late. Thanks for answering my question. No problem at all. Michael, I don't know if I've seen your name before, so I also promise that my camera is normally a little bit better. We had some issues today, so we hope to see you back again. Interesting follow-up here then for this to show the power of the GI map. So I've done a lot of crazy experiments, Lisa. And back at 21, 22, so I hadn't ran the GI map yet. This was a few months before, and I'm going through FDN and all this kind of stuff. I got severe stomach pain that like really freaked me out. I had actually, ironically, been to the hospital many times as a kid for stomach pain, but they always gave me like Pepcid or something and it would help out and then they sent me home, whatever. This time was a little bit different. It started over a few day period and then it got really severe and it freaked me out. So I actually got fully admitted to the hospital and in a 3-day span had the wonderful privilege of being able to do a back-to-back on 2 separate days, endoscopy and colonoscopy. Now, because I had the symptoms, though, that could be correlated with something like H. pylori, in that case, they did tell me that they did a biopsy, tested for H. pylori, or looked for H. pylori, rather, and did not find it. Now, 3 months later, I did a GI map, and H. pylori with virulence factors came up on that. During those 3 months, I wasn't like kissing anyone or dating anyone at the time. I lived with my buddy. I had a very like boring, stable life. I lived with my buddy, and that buddy is someone I've known since 3rd grade. And I'd lived with him for like the last year and a half. So there is a very improbable chance that I somehow picked up that infection randomly in a 3-month span. And remember, this is a guy who had stomach pain his whole life, cystic acne, ulcer history, like a bunch of other things that would correlate with H. pylori. Or I had it beforehand. So this isn't even like poking at Western medicine, but like just to show the power of this technology, how the heck, assuming I had it at the time, how the heck could a biopsy miss something like that? And yet this DNA testing is that good that it could find it. Is it actually common for biopsies to miss H. pylori?
It is, unfortunately. And that's where, if you look in the medical literature, they say there is no gold standard test for H. pylori because it's in the stomach. I mean, it's really hard to, get down there and get it or go up and get it. It's stuck in between. And the problem is that H. pylori colonization is very patchy. So you could have one really nasty patch that's an ulcer. And yet the rest of the stomach may be not too bad. Or again, you have these little patches, really bad inflamed gastritis patches. But if they're taking a sample, you have to consider they're taking a sample the size of like a pencil eraser. And H. pylori, while it's often in the body, the main part of the stomach, it could be the upper stomach, it could be the lower stomach. They're only taking maybe a couple samples. So they have to hit the right spot. And so if they don't hit the right spot, it's going to come up as negative. Wow. And there's a lot of complicating factors too, like, they don't always tell people either. It's like if you're in a PPI, that could interfere with the test results. If you have bleeding, when we're looking like there's urea breath tests, there's endoscopy with biopsy, if the stomach is actually bleeding, if someone's on a PPI, if they're on Bismuth, that can actually affect the accuracy of these tests. And the problem is a lot of these people, they have heartburn, so they're on a PPI before they get the test done. So are we getting a false negative because the PPI is interfering or the bleeding's interfering? Again, that's the beauty of the qPCR technology is there's less interference factors when we're looking directly for that DNA.
That was a profound experience for me at the time because I know I can't prove it. I would bet everything in my life. I'd bet my life actually that I had H. pylori at the time and it just didn't show up. And that's where you truly get humbled by the complications of the mixed systems that patients and clients are in right now. Because you know what? I think about those doctors and people that were doing those procedures on me. They did mean that and they meant well and they weren't lying. Like, some people get into this space and then they have such a resentment for Western medicine. I don't share that anymore. I haven't shared that in years. And I know that you certainly don't either. It's like, This is so much more complicated than that. Those people believed wholeheartedly what they were saying. And yet I run the right tests that they would never even think to run. And it's like, whoa, this was a huge part of my healing journey that I needed. I did actually address H. pylori quite well, thankfully. I know that for a fact. So it was more the parasites that I didn't address as well. And it's like, I would have walked around if I didn't have access to the stuff at FDN and the knowledge of FDN too, not even just access to the tests, thinking, oh, what was that H. pylori thing? I Google that. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I don't have it. Western medicine told me I don't have it. And they don't even tell me that it could be a false negative, right? So it's really crazy and humbling when you realize how complicated this stuff gets. And the best we can do is just keep sharing information like this. So it's super easy to talk to you. We have like 6-7 minutes left. It's not a hard stop by any means. I just want to wrap up with a few really important questions. Of course, we'll talk about soon where people can find you. But before that, I want to word this question correctly, because normally I word it as like a client testimonial. It could be a client testimonial, but I know yourself and of course FDN's out there. We don't just look at stool testing, even though it's very important. We look at a set of tests with every client. However, I would like to know if there's any cases that you can think of off the top of your head, to the degree that you're able to share, of course, that the client or person whose test results you got back, by finding the stuff on the stool test, it like totally changed their life and their healing journey. So what I mean is, even if they ran a series of 5 or 10 labs, it's because they ran the GI map stool test and found stuff on there, like that was their main healing opportunity or some of their main root causes. So are there any people that you could think of in your head that just have like an incredible story where we identified stuff on the GI map, we addressed it, and we restored their health or at least significantly improved it?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, but I mean, one just really cool story that it was actually, this was someone that another one of the medical education clinicians on the team at Diagnostic Solutions Lab, they had this case, but they were consulting on it. And so the clinician is the one consulting with us. They ran the GI map on their patient, and they found the really high level of occult blood and calprotectin. So, I mean, if we're finding things like that, I mean, that's a serious issue. So we're generally referring out to a gastroenterologist for further testing. And that's what this clinician did. They referred out their patient. Patient went to the gastroenterologist. They did an endoscopy. So they went down and took a look in the stomach. And then they went up and did a colonoscopy and checked out the colon. And they said, I don't know, this test must be wrong. I don't see anything. Everything looks fine to me. So they sent him back to this clinician. Well, so this clinician runs another GI map, even more blood, even more inflammation. And so they're calling us and going, well, the client is going to their gastro and they're saying, it's like, we're essentially nuts because they don't see anything. They've done all their standard tests. And yet we're going, this test is getting worse and worse. This is not looking good. This gut is so massively inflamed and it's bleeding really terribly. And so then the patient goes back to their gastro and they said, you need to do something different. I believe this test, there is something major wrong with me. And of course, they had symptoms too, severe symptoms. It's like, you need to do something else. There is something wrong with me. And they said, well, we scoped you both ways. What we could do is a capsule endoscopy. You're going to swallow a capsule, because an endoscopy, if you're going down, of course, the throat, you can't really get into the small intestine very well. It kind of stops at like the stomach, maybe very upper part of the small intestine. And then, of course, your colonoscopy, you're coming up from the bottom, you're getting more of the colon. Again, your small intestine is like your missing piece. So you swallow this capsule, it's going to read everything all the way down. So they did the capsule endoscopy. They found Crohn's disease. The patient had IBD. The GI maps, I mean, if it wasn't for this clinician calling us up and saying, how do you explain this? And just the patient themselves being their own health advocate, going back to their gastro and saying, I believe this test, something is wrong. I'm so sick. This test is showing how I feel. Do more testing. There's something wrong. You got to find it. And they found it. And I mean, and that just changed their life because Crohn's, I mean, we're obviously going to approach Crohn's very differently. And so they were able to get on the proper treatment for Crohn's, and it's changed their life.
Okay, well, you did not under-deliver with that. I figured I'd get a cool story. Just so you know, your guys' results may vary a little bit if you're doing enough GI maps, but yeah, that's literally life-changing. And I could spend a whole nother hour, I won't, but talking about how it's one thing if it's presenting on the test. The fact that the client was presenting with symptoms too. You'd think Western medicine would be all over that, but it's like the second that their tools even kind of become limited or run out, it's like, oops, you're good to go. And you're fine. It's like, no, obviously not. I still feel like crap and I'm still showing up with this other stuff. I really wish I knew about that capsule endoscopy thing before I underwent my stuff. That sounds I'm sure it's not fun, but it sounds a little bit more pleasant than the anesthetics and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, and again, newer technology. I mean, that's where the tools we need. Western medicine, more integrative medicine, working together because we have different tools and they
mhm.
pair well together. If we
Yes.
see something like that, we need the Western medicine. We need their tools, their diagnostic tools, and then we can work together
Yep.
and go, okay, we have a diagnosis. Now, what's the best, treatments we can bring in from the Western medicine standpoint with the physician, and what can natural interventions we can do with the diet and the lifestyle and the supplements to help them out.
Yeah, and shout out to all the docs and nurse practitioners out there who are keeping an open mind, and because I know plenty of stories too that it's not this exact thing, right? But we send out a referral to them, and they're like, "Wow, this is so cool that this person tested for this and helped with this," and they're very appreciative of it. So I want to shout that out as well. Since we're at the end of our time here, Lisa, can you just talk about everything that you offer and where people can find you? Because from my understanding, they could get some clinical support from you, and you also do a variety of other things. Obviously, you've helped create some of our advanced courses here at FDN. So let's shout it all out and then where people can find you.
Yeah, so if someone's interested in the GI map and learning more about that, there's the website for the lab, diagnosticsolutionslab.com. And that's, for clinicians too, learning the test because we know, if you're an MD, I talk to every day, I talk to dietitians and MDs and DCs and DOs and nurse practitioners. It runs the gamut, health coaches. And so, it's a new technology. It's a different kind of test, so practitioners need a little help. So that's where, myself and the rest of us, there's like 13 of us now on the medical education team. So, that's where we offer these free 30-minute consultations. So we know the GI map is overwhelming when you first look at it. You need to know the nuances. So that's where we're there as the clinical education team to help you go through the report with you, point out, what are some things, how can we optimize things, offer some suggestions. So that's what we're here for. There's also a lot of great, podcast interviews and webinars and free educational resources on the website too. So that's a great resource. Myself, my own personal website is pomeroyinstitute.com. So what I do, my education, my focus these days is more educating practitioners. And so rather than working one-on-one with clients, so I work for the lab. I also have my own business. So I do more one-on-one practitioner mentoring.
Mhm.
So again, say you're running tests, it may be stool tests, it may be other things. And so, you just need a little help interpreting it. So I can help with that and integrate several tests together. And I do have some in-depth training courses as well. Like I have one on the GI map where if you really want to geek out and get like 100 hours of training on the GI map, I got your back.
You say 100 hours?
100 hours. Yeah. Basically, I kind of put everything in my brain into a course. So it was a massive project and I couldn't, when you love this stuff, it's like, well, what can I cut out? It's like, I feel like it's all important. So it all just went in there. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Guys, I hope you check her out, especially if some of the new FDNs, you might actually not know who Lisa is. Your name came up every day when I graduated 8 years ago. So if you do not know her, go check out her stuff. And this is someone who thinks like an FDN. So it's always a great person to go to if you need support with anything. I also, DSL was nice enough to sponsor us for Holistic Health Week. So this was the first episode. I wanted to do a month's worth of ad reads for you guys. So I will finish with this. And then we have one more question really quick, our signature question on the show. I just wanted to say this podcast is brought to you in part by Diagnostic Solutions Laboratory, the creators of the GI Map, which is a cutting-edge stool test that provides deep insights into gut health. And at FDN, we do rely on the GI Map as a foundational tool. So if you sign up for FDN, you actually get the GI Map amongst 5 other tests included in your cost of tuition. You will run that as an FDN on yourself, and during your mentorship, you will actually get one-on-one results and recommendation sessions for the GI map and your other tests. So that's how much we love it that we actually include this in the cost of tuition at FDN. And whether you're a practitioner looking for powerful functional testing or someone seeking real answers to your health concerns, DSL is a trusted partner in root cause healing. You can learn more at diagnosticsolutionsLab.com. Lisa, we'll finish up today with the signature question on the show. This can be very general. It doesn't have to do anything with stool testing necessarily. The signature question on the show is, if I could give you a magic wand, you could wave it and you could get all of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for our health. So that means you could get us to start doing one thing, or you could get us to stop doing one thing. What the heck is the one thing that Lisa Pomeroy, with all of your thousands of hours of knowledge, gets us to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I believe, like Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. So I'm all about nourishing the microbiome, and we will have to look at what do good gut bugs, like to eat. They like to eat fiber. So for me, it's going to be getting the prebiotics from your fiber-rich plant foods. So including more of those and getting a diverse diet. Because what they've actually found, different studies have found that 30 or more different plant foods a week is what we should aim for to have a really nice, healthy, diverse microbiome. Because really, if you have those, again, when we're talking defenses against the bad guys, whether it's a parasite or just some bacteria that or yeast that's in the gut but can grow out of control, your good guys protect you. They're doing a lot of things there. They're on your side and they're going to push these guys out. They're going to inhibit their growth. So if we can support our good guys with these plant-based fibers, so I mean, the whole grains, the beans, legumes, and lentils, fruits and veggies, the more color, the better, because they also like polyphenols. So I mean, doesn't mean we have to go vegetarian or vegan. We just want to have a lot of these rich, fiber-rich plant foods in our diet.
Awesome. Guys, check out DSL, check out Lisa. Thank you so much for doing this with us today, Lisa. And guys, thank you for bearing with my camera. I promise we did not replace me with AI Ev. I am actually still here. I love talking way too much. They will never replace me as a host with AI version of me. I will always be here with you guys. And if you'd like Lisa back on in the future, let us know in the comments. Even if you're watching this afterwards, still let us know in the comments and we'll make sure to invite her back. Again, Lisa, thank you so much for being a part of Holistic Health Week and starting it off in such an amazing way, and then coming on today as well.